Before we begin, subscribe if you dare to step behind walls built to bury men alive. Like this video if you believe no prison is truly escape-proof. And comment below, could you survive even one night inside these walls? Because in June 2015, America learned something terrifying. Even stone can crack. The town of Dannemora, New York, is quiet in a way that feels deliberate, as if the air itself knows better than to move too loudly. At its center stands Clinton Correctional Facility, a fortress of gray stone and razor wire that has dominated the horizon since 1865. Locals call it Little Siberia. Winters freeze the marrow. Summers suffocate in silence. The prison walls rise 30 feet high, thick and medieval, lined with guard towers that watch like unblinking eyes. Inside, time does not pass. It echoes. Steel doors slam with a thunder that rolls down concrete corridors. Boots scrape against worn floors. Radios crackle. Every movement is counted, logged, recorded. Inmates live under a choreography of control. Head counts at dawn, controlled meals, recreation in cages of fencing under armed supervision. And yet, beneath the routine, something was shifting. Richard Matt and David Sweat were not ordinary inmates. Both were serving life sentences for brutal crimes. Both had reputations: intelligent, quiet, observant. Matt had artistic talent, painting portraits that earned small privileges. Sweat worked in the tailor shop. They were model prisoners on paper. But prisons run on more than paperwork. They run on favors. Somewhere between the clang of metal doors and the whispers through vents, an unthinkable alliance began forming. Civilian prison employee Joyce Mitchell worked in the tailor shop. She brought fabric, scissors, tools. She was trusted. She was invisible in the way middle-aged employees often become in institutions powered by routine. Invisible people are rarely watched closely. Over months, small items disappeared. A hacksaw blade. A screwdriver. Food wrapped tighter than usual. Nothing large enough to trigger alarms. Nothing dramatic. Just patience. Inside their cells, Matt and Sweat worked in darkness. They cut through steel behind their bunks, hiding progress behind carefully placed posters and painted surfaces. Each night, the prison performed bed checks. Flashlights skimmed over lumps beneath blankets, shapes that appeared human. But appearances inside prison are currency. The walls began to change. Behind concrete, they found pipes. Steam lines. Ancient infrastructure that dated back generations. The prison was not just stone, it was a maze of forgotten maintenance tunnels. Rusted walkways. Narrow crawl spaces. Blackness so thick it swallowed sound. They studied guard patterns. Learned shift rotations. Memorized the rhythm of security. The prison thought it owned their bodies. It never realized they were studying its veins. On the night of June 5, 2015, the air was heavy. Nothing unusual. No alarms. No screams. Just another lockdown settling in. Then the cutting stopped. The men slipped through holes barely wider than their shoulders. They crawled into the guts of Clinton, through steam pipes radiating blistering heat, through pitch-black corridors where one wrong step meant a fall into darkness. The prison groaned around them, ancient and unaware. Above, officers completed rounds. Flashlights swept across decoys, dummy bodies shaped from clothes beneath blankets. The illusion held. Somewhere deep in the structure, Matt and Sweat reached a final barrier, a thick exterior pipe. They cut through it slowly, patiently, listening for footsteps. And then, after midnight, they emerged outside the walls. They walked past guard towers. They crossed the perimeter. No alarms sounded. By morning, the cells were opened for breakfast. Officers called names. Silence answered. Blankets were pulled back. And America's most secure fortress suddenly looked fragile. The prison that had stood for 150 years had been outsmarted from within. What no one yet understood was that this wasn't just an escape. It was the beginning of a humiliation that would expose corruption, human weakness, and the terrifying truth about how even the strongest walls depend on flawed people. And somewhere beyond those stone towers, two life-sentenced men were breathing free air for the first time in decades. The manhunt had not even begun. But the prison already knew. It had been breached. When the alarm finally sounded, it wasn't loud at first. It started as confusion. An officer frowned at an empty bunk. Another pulled back a blanket and froze. The shapes beneath the sheets weren't men. They were bundles of clothes stuffed carefully to mimic sleeping bodies. Pillowcases positioned just right. Blankets raised at the chest. For a moment, no one moved. Then the radio traffic exploded. 2 missing from Block B. Confirm head count. Lock down the facility. Steel doors slammed across the tiers like dominoes. Inmates pressed their faces to bars, whispers spreading through the corridors like wildfire. Footsteps pounded against concrete. The prison that once felt invincible now felt exposed, vulnerable, almost embarrassed. Outside, sirens pierced the quiet morning air of Dannemora. Searchlights scanned the perimeter. K-9 units were deployed. Officers rushed to the workshop area, tracing the escape route backward. When they found the holes cut behind the cells, silence fell over the inspection team. Clean cuts. Careful work. Months of effort hidden in plain sight. Behind the walls, administrators realized something worse than the escape itself. This had help. Investigators retraced the path through the maintenance tunnels, crawling through narrow steel arteries coated in rust and grime. The air was suffocating. Steam pipes radiated heat that scorched skin. It was almost impossible to believe 2 men navigated this maze in darkness without guidance. But they had. And they left behind evidence. Tools. Food wrappers. And a note. A mocking smiley face drawn near the final exit point, as if the prison itself had been laughed at. By noon, the story had exploded nationwide. News helicopters circled overhead. State police flooded the region. The governor appeared on television, promising a relentless manhunt. Roads were blocked. Schools closed. Residents were told to lock their doors. The fortress had failed. But the humiliation was just beginning. Inside Clinton, tension thickened like smoke. Inmates were confined to cells. Recreation canceled. Meals delivered through slots. The atmosphere turned electric, fear mixed with admiration. Some inmates whispered that Matt and Sweat had beaten the system. Others worried the lockdown would last for weeks. Guards walked the tiers with sharper eyes now. Suspicion replaced routine. Meanwhile, outside the walls, investigators began examining staff. Security footage revealed nothing obvious. No door left open. No perimeter breach. No tower distraction. But then they reviewed tailor shop logs. Joyce Mitchell's name appeared repeatedly in both men's work assignments. At first, she denied everything. She was cooperative, nervous, insistent that she knew nothing about an escape plan. But prisons are ecosystems built on patterns. And patterns began unraveling. Phone records showed unusual communication. Co-workers mentioned she seemed emotionally attached to one of the inmates. Small conversations, subtle laughter, extra attention. Under questioning, cracks appeared. She admitted smuggling in hacksaw blades hidden inside frozen hamburger meat. She thought the men were planning to kill her abusive husband. That was the story they told her. But it wasn't the whole truth. They had manipulated her. Promises were made. Fantasies whispered. A plan discussed where she would pick them up after the escape and drive them away. She was supposed to be their getaway driver. But when the night came, she panicked. Instead of meeting them, she checked herself into a hospital claiming chest pains. And so, Matt and Sweat climbed out of the prison walls alone. The revelation stunned investigators. A civilian employee had compromised one of America's most secure facilities. Not through force. Not through violence. Through emotion. Back inside Clinton, the prison seemed to tighten around itself. Supervisors questioned staff. Officers felt betrayed. How had no one noticed blades going missing? How had noise inside the cells gone undetected? The answer was uncomfortable. Routine breeds blindness. Clinton had stood for over a century, surviving riots, harsh winters, hardened criminals. Its thick stone walls projected strength. But it was never just about walls. It was about people. And people make mistakes. As days passed, the manhunt intensified. Hundreds of officers combed the dense forests surrounding Dannemora. Tracking dogs followed scents that vanished in streams. Residents reported sightings that led nowhere. Each passing hour deepened the humiliation. National media framed it as a catastrophic failure. Late-night shows mocked the security breach. The prison's name, once synonymous with toughness, now carried a different weight. Inside the facility, inmates lay awake at night listening to distant helicopters. Somewhere beyond the razor wire, 2 men were still free. And with every sunrise they remained uncaptured. The legend grew. But legends rarely end the way people expect. Because out in those vast woods, survival wasn't a movie script. It was cold. It was hunger. It was fear. And the forest was far less forgiving than prison walls. The escape had embarrassed America. The forest did not care about headlines. It did not care about humiliation, politics, or television cameras circling overhead. Beyond the stone walls of Clinton Correctional Facility stretched miles of dense Adirondack wilderness, thick brush, jagged terrain, and nights so cold they bit through bone. In June, the days were humid and heavy, but once the sun dropped, the temperature fell fast. The woods swallowed light whole. For Richard Matt and David Sweat, freedom was no longer a fantasy whispered through vents. It was raw, uncertain, and unforgiving. They moved mostly at night, navigating by instinct and stolen maps. During the day, they hid beneath fallen trees or inside abandoned hunting cabins. Hunger came quickly. They broke into seasonal homes, stealing food, clothes, anything that could buy them another day. Each break-in triggered new waves of fear across upstate New York. Residents slept with lights on. Police checkpoints multiplied. Armed patrols moved through rural roads that had once been silent. The manhunt grew into one of the largest in modern state history. More than 1,000 officers joined the search. Tactical teams, helicopters with thermal imaging, K-9 units tracking faint scents through mud and water. The wilderness became a battlefield of patience. Every snapped twig raised tension. Every false lead drained energy. Days passed. Then a week. Then 2. Inside Clinton, the lockdown eased slightly, but the psychological weight remained. Guards walked with rigid shoulders. Administrators faced investigations. Policies were rewritten. The prison felt quieter now, stripped of its illusion of invincibility. It had been wounded, and the longer the escapees remained free, the deeper that wound cut. But the woods were closing in. Matt and Sweat began separating for short periods, searching for supplies. The partnership that had thrived inside prison walls began to strain under pressure. In prison, structure defines survival. Outside, chaos does. On June 26, 3 weeks after the escape, law enforcement received a credible tip near Malone, New York. Tactical units moved cautiously through the trees. Richard Matt was spotted first. He was armed with a shotgun taken from a cabin. Officers ordered him to surrender. What happened next unfolded in seconds. Shots were fired. Officers responded. When the gunfire stopped, Matt lay motionless in the grass. The news spread quickly. 1 escapee down. But David Sweat was still out there. And alone. The forest that once shielded him now felt enormous and hostile. Sweat moved constantly, exhausted, thinner, desperate. Without Matt, the dynamic shifted. The confident duo was gone. Now it was survival against overwhelming force. 2 days later, near the Canadian border, a state trooper spotted a figure walking along a rural road. It was Sweat. The trooper shouted commands. Sweat ran. The chase was brief. Gunfire echoed across the open stretch of pavement. Sweat collapsed but survived. He was captured alive, wounded but breathing. After 22 days, the manhunt ended. America exhaled. But the damage lingered. Investigations revealed layers of complacency inside Clinton. Missed warning signs, unchecked familiarity between staff and inmates, routines so predictable they became exploitable. Joyce Mitchell later admitted she had been manipulated with promises of affection and escape fantasies. She pled guilty and was sentenced to prison herself. The irony was stark. A prison employee had crossed to the other side of the bars. David Sweat was transferred to a different maximum security facility, this time under even stricter conditions. Interviews later revealed chilling detail. The months of preparation, The calculated patience, the understanding that human weakness, not concrete, was the true vulnerability. And that was the twist America struggled to accept. The escape was not just about two men crawling through pipes. It was about trust. About how institutions built on control can slowly erode from within. How routine blinds vigilance. How even the most fortified walls depend on ordinary people making consistent, disciplined choices every single day. Clinton Correctional Facility still stands today. The stone walls remain. The guard towers still scan the horizon. Inmates still hear the slam of steel doors echo down long corridors. But something changed after 2015. The prison is quieter now, not from weakness, but from awareness. Because once a fortress has been breached, it never forgets. And neither does a nation that watched two life-sentenced men step into the night and disappear. For 22 days, America was reminded of a truth as old as prisons themselves. No system is stronger than the people who guard it. And sometimes, the greatest threat isn't outside the walls. It's already inside.